Imperialism is derived from the Latin word imperium, which means power or rule. Imperialism allowed domination and free exploitation of the natural resources of the countries being ruled. Imperialism is more about setting up empires and expanding territories to satisfy one's national pride. The countries ruled by these European powers were rendered powerless in the bargain. Scientific inventions. The Renaissance movement transformed medieval Europe into a modern world. The thirst for knowledge never seemed to end. New ideas led to new inventions. Scientific thinking led to the creation of new machines which ran on steam, electricity, and coal. The invention of steam engine helped to speed up the movement of goods between countries. The invention of the telegraph system further helped to link the world and thereby reduce distances between places. This revolution in transportation and communication became a boon for the European countries. These achievements led to fierce ambitions between the European nations, which became one of the reasons for imperialism. Industrial Revolution. Machine-made goods were in surplus, but there were no markets available in Europe to sell them. There was also a need for continuous flow of raw materials to keep the production going. So these European nations turned their attention to Africa and Asia, which had not yet been industrialized. There began a race for these continents. Prosperity of Asia and Africa. Frequent voyages made to the continents of Asia and Africa for the purpose of trade had made the European nations aware that these places were rich in minerals and resources. This led to a race, and soon countries in Africa and Asia were brought under the imperial rule of the European. Rising nationalism in European nations. The latter part of the 19th century led to the rise of extreme nationalism in Europe. Newly unified nations like Germany and Italy wanted to join the other European nations in the race for colonial expansion. They were inspired by England and envied her colonies. This led to a further rise in imperialism, national pride and political ambition. These newly unified nations took great pride in their language, race, and culture. This led to a feeling of superiority in them. They felt that territorial expansion would further add to their pride and prestige. This new trend of thought created suspicions in the mind of the other European nations who already had colonies. Soon, they also strengthened their attempts at colonization. The European nations got ready to win terrestrial and military posts of strategic importance. The race for imperialism increased. Propagation of religion. The Europeans believed that the white man's religion and culture was superior. They considered the natives to be savages, the white man's burden, who needed to be civilized. So under the pretext of propagating their religion, Christianity, these European nations began the process of imperialism. Trade of slaves. Human labor was very cheap in the continent of Africa. So, the European nations started indulging in slavery. They got a lot of work done from the natives for very low wages. Later, the trading of slaves began, which would benefit the rich European capitalists. These slaves would serve in the European countries and also in their own country. These slaves could be retained only by colonizing and exerting power. This became a good reason for imperial domination. Weakness of Asia and Africa. Asia and Africa were vast and rich in resources, but this was a bane rather than a boon for them. Years of invasions and feudalism had weakened the political and economic structure in the countries here. Industrialization had not reached them, and agriculture remained their main livelihood. Their societies were also divided by religions, languages, and cults. In comparison, the Europeans were far superior. They took full advantage of these limitations and brought Asia and Africa under their imperial rule. State of anarchy. Finally, it can be said there was no international body to stop the feverish grabbing of territories that these European countries indulged in. The race for supremacy kept increasing. A state of anarchy prevailed as each nation tried to outdo the other in the race for colonies. They fought wars and small battles to lay their stake over the colonies. Eventually, these factors acted as a catalyst for the First World War.